Hello and welcome back to the Wheelbrick. Today I'm going to build and review the brand new Lego Lilo and Stitch Beach House. This is set 43268. It has 834 pieces in it. It's rated 9 plus. This is a very hot set for the March 2025 drop. Here's a back view of it. You can see inside the house and a few more details. I'll get into that later once it's built. Inside the box, we have the instruction manual, and then we have a sticker sheet, and then we have bag 1, bag 2, bag 3, bag 4, bag 5, and last but not least, bag 6. So let's get into it. So here is a completed model of the Lilo and Stitch house. Oh my gosh, it's so cute. There's so many details and movie references, so let's get into it. I figured before we get into the house, let's check out the minifigures. So here we go. We'll start with Stitch first. So Stitch has a lighter blue color, unlike before. He used to have a darker blue color. Of course, he's got all the prints on him and the prints back here. And then he also has his blaster, which he can hold. Let's go ahead and put that on him. He's got his blaster, and then he's got his coffee, which I think is so cool. So he's got his blaster and his coffee. Oh my gosh, he's so cute. Moving on to Lilo here, she has her camera, of course. And then she also has a printed dress and then a flower piece in her hair. And if you actually take the hair piece off and flip the head around, there's a little face that she makes. And I'll show you the same thing with Nani, but this is a reference to the movie. Put her hair piece back on, and there we go, we have Lilo. So here we have Nani. She has hair and then a hair piece, of course, and then she also has a little smirk on her face on the back, and this is, like I said, was a reference to the movie where they kind of got into a fight, and I won't spoil it, but they were making faces at each other, so that's a reference to the movie. Taking a look here, we have David, and he has these flaming sticks, which is also another reference to the movie. He it does a show with flaming sticks, and it kind of goes wrong in the movie. I won't spoil it, that's all I'll say. He also has a print, an alternative head on the back, which I think is so nice. Finally, we have Mr. Bubbles, which of course he is the social worker in Lilo and Stitch. He's got a little briefcase here and a little bald head, and he looks so like he does in the movie, that face, oh my gosh. So you may notice there's not any Jumba or Peekly in this set. I think why Lego, there's two reasons Lego left them out in my opinion. One, they didn't want to drive the price up anymore, and two, I would assume there's going to be another set down the line that has them in it specifically. Since the Lilo and Stitch movie is coming out this year, I would not be surprised if Lego came out with another set to this series. One more thing before we get into the actual main build of the house, we do have a little spaceship for Lilo and Stitch. There's a little place you can put Stitch in there. And then there's also a place for another minifigure. So ideally, Lilo can be behind Stitch and they could ride along together. Isn't that so nice? You can also move the little boosters, and the little boosters actually are little cupcake pieces. I think this is so neat as a side build. Moving on to the main build of the house, or the main build of this set, which is the house. This is the new house after it gets destroyed in the movie. It's not the original house. But it is kind of the original house inside. I'll show you that here in a second. But a few details pointing out. Of course, we have the porch here, which I think is so nice. There are so many like shrubs and trees that just tie it in all together. They have the surfboard storage over here. And then you have like a little doggy door that actually does open. And then up here, you of course have the observatory, which I'll show here in a second. And then you have some flowers in here, like I've said before. And the blue color just ties it in so nice. Here's a little overview of the entirety of the back. I'll go through each room individually and show each little detail, but otherwise it's all open back here, so you can reach in there and theoretically play in there. I'll show you why that's kind of hard here in a second, but let's get into each room. So I think the hallway is a great place to start. So of course you have the wood in here, and then like I said before, the doggy door actually opens. Unfortunately, Stitch does not fit through there. But I think it's just so cool that they had to add that. In the living room here, we have the couch, of course. And then I think this is so neat. We have all of Lilo's friends, or the experiments, in this little bottle, which I think is so neat. Of course, you can take that out. And then we also have the record player in here, which I think is so cool that they added that. Another reference to the movie. Let's put that back in there. And that's pretty much for the living room. It is kind of small, but at this scale, I would expect that. Moving over to the kitchen, there is a lot to talk about here. So first of all, we have the fridge here, and then we have a picture that Lilo drew that says, "Me alone." And then you have something up here on the cooker at the stove top, burning, of course. You got a little sink in there, and then you have a little, like, boiler heat thing, and then you have the washer and dryer with some little clothes stacked up there. Of course, you can open that up, and then of course you have the tile flooring in here also. Moving up top here, we have Nani's bed, and then we have a picture here with a lamp, and then we have a family photo here, and we have Jumba and we have Peekly in this family photo. Of course, we have everyone else too, which I think is so cool, but I kind of wish they would have added Jumba and Peekly, but it's whatever. Moving over here, we have a hula statue, and then we have Stitch's bed, and I forgot to show this when I was showing the minifigures, but of course we have
Scrump, which I think is so cool that we have Scrump. He is a little big. He's about as tall as Stitch, but I don't know if there's really a better way to do that for Scrump, obviously, but I'm so glad we got him. Moving on to Stitch's bed, we of course have the Aloha pineapple, like it's shown in the movie. Of course, we have the bed in there, and then Stitch, he kind of fits in there. Yeah, he doesn't really like completely fit in there, but you can kind of put him in there. Moving on into Lilo's room, we of course have the hula lamp in there, and then we have her bed, and then we got it's kind of hard to see, but we got a few pictures in there of Stitch and Nani and all that. And then of course we have the little ukulele. Unfortunately, I don't know why they couldn't make a separate piece, probably because it would drive the price up of this set, but it is a guitar. It's meant to be a ukulele. Up here we have the observatory, and then in here it's a little hard to get to. Usually I have to take this piece off to get to it, but we have the Ugly Duck book here, which I think is so cool. If you open it up, he says, "I'm lost." I think that is so cool that they added that. And so it kind of gets stored up here in the observatory. I also like to store Stitch's gun up here in the observatory. And then sometimes his coffee can be stored up here. And then, of course, if you really wanted to, you could put Stitch up in the observatory as well and have him hanging out up there, which I think is so neat. So I'm going to talk about one of the things that a lot of people have been saying about the set. It's too small. I think that's valid, but for this scale and this price, it's really not, because you're actually getting half of a house. And what do I mean by that? I had the Simpsons house. I recently got rid of it, but it was completely closed in, and it didn't have like an open spot. It had a hinge, but it was a full entire house. But then again, here's a big difference. That costed $200. This cost close to $100. So of course, $100 less, half of the price of the Simpsons house. And I'm using the Simpsons house as an example because it's a licensed one like this is. But you're obviously, if you add in like a whole another section, it's going to be a whole $100 more expensive. So that's what you really got to think about here. So a couple other YouTube reviews that I've seen have said, well, why can't you extend this out more? Well, because it would add cost for one, and Lego wants to market this towards kids, 9+. And I will tell you right now, is if they did that, this would be at least $150 to $200 if they made this bigger. And I will tell you also right now that most parents will not spend that kind of money for, say if a kid wanted this for his birthday or their birthday or whatever. I don't see a parent buying that for them for that price if they're like young. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but it's hard to justify it. That's why I think they tried to make it, proportioned right, but they also didn't want to drive the price up ridiculously expensive. So what are my final thoughts on this? I think it's a little too pricey. They should have priced it about $75 to $80 instead of $90. I think for a Lilo and Stitch fan like me, this is a great house. I would probably wait and see if they had a sale and then get it. But also, like, there's so much jam-packed in this set. There's so many movie references, like I've said before. I think any Lilo and Stitch fan will really enjoy this. Kids will really enjoy this, even though it's kind of small. But anyway, that's my thoughts on the new Lilo and Stitch set. Let me know what you think. Put them down in the comments. Subscribe to The Wheel Brick. Follow The Wheel Brick on Instagram. And I'll see you next video.